Guys, welcome to the course of Level 8 API Development tutorial. This is our part number 35. Inside this video, we will create API controllers. So if I back to slide. So in the last video, we had discussed that what are the APIs we need inside this third phase of API development. So we had discussed that we need a user register API, user login, user profile, logout, user course enrollment, total user courses, and finally delete course from user. So for all these operations we need two different controller. The first controller will be something user controller, or we can say auth controller, and the second controller we need something, let's say, course controller or enrollment controller. So if I back to terminal to create controllers, before that if I back to editor, go inside app, http controllers. So right now we don't have any controller, only we have the file controller.php, which is by default. So we will create two different controller. The first, let's say, user controller, and the second, course controller. So php artisan make controller. And one more thing before creating controller, if you open this help manual, so inside this help manual, as we can see that while creating controller, also we can specify the model from which this controller will be associated. So when we create user controller, as we know that inside user controller we will use user model, and when we create course controller we will associate or use course model. So we will attach while creating these controllers. So let's say php artisan make controller user controller, and simply pass model equal to and the name of model. So if I press enter, controller created successfully. If I back to editor, go and reload, and here we can see that we are getting user controller, and here inside this controller file model successfully imported. And also one more thing, that we don't want this user controller or course controller inside this controllers folder. What we want, all API controllers should be placed inside a API folder. So let's delete that. So I'm deleting this controller. Back to terminal, go here with this command, and what I will do, here we have user controller, so we want inside API controller means API folder. So simply we need to add the folder name here, API and /. After passing this value, pressing enter, controller created successfully. Back to editor, go and reload this directory structure, and here we can see that we have a API folder, user controller, and the model imported successfully. Now next, we need to create course controller. So if I back to terminal, again type the same command called php artisan make controller. Folder name is something API /, and the controller name is something course controller. And for this case, the model we want something course here. So pressing enter, controller created successfully. Back to editor, go and reload this directory structure, and here you can see that we are getting a course controller. So when we will create this user controller with the model, course controller with the model, so by default Laravel has generated the resource controller. So as we know that we don't want this resource controller, so what I will do, simply we need to remove all these methods. So let's remove all these methods. So simply I will copy all these methods and remove from this user controller. The same thing we need to do with this course controller. So what I will do, I will select all these methods and remove from this course controller. So instead of that all methods, what we want a user register API, user login API, and profile logout inside user controller. Back to editor, go here, let's say public function register, and this is for user register API. Now next we want public function login. This is for login API. Public function profile for profile API. And finally, one more method we want, public function logout. So successfully guys, we have now created 4 different methods inside this user controller. So if we talk about the parameters, in which way API we need parameters to send inside all these methods. So for this register API, we will hit using post request type, and inside this we need parameters, because by the help of parameters we will register user. So inside this method we need to pass the request instance, so that by the help of this instance we can read the body parameters. So here user register API, and this is by using post request type. Now if I will copy, go here, add a single line comment, this is user login API, also it will be post request type, and inside this login API also we need the request instance, because by the help of request instance we will read the email address and the password. By the help of those credentials we will log in the user. Now inside this profile API we don't need any parameters, instead we need only JWT token. By the help of JWT token we will authorize, verify about its validation, and if it is valid then we will fetch the user details from payload. Because in the last video also we had discussed all about the structure. So JWT contains header, payload and signature. Inside this payload we will store all about authenticated information. Back to editor. So this is again, and this time it is using get request type. If I will copy, go here, pasting it here, this is using get request type, and this will be something user profile API and user logout API. So all we have done with all the required methods of this user controller. Back to course controller, what are the methods we need inside this controller? So public function, the first method we need something user course enrollment. It means the entry inside courses table. So inside courses table we need the entries inside these columns like user ID, title, description and total videos. So user ID we will fetch from JWT token, but rest parameters we need inside body. So also we need the request instance. So let's say course enrollment. So this is the method, and inside this method we need to pass our request class, and next create to request instance. So request and request. So if we'll add one line single comment, that is course enrollment API, and it is also using post request type. Now next, the next API we need something total user courses. It means by the help of JWT token we want to fetch all the courses that user has actually enrolled. So go here, let's say that public function total courses, and inside this in the URL we will pass, actually not in the URL, inside header we will pass JWT token. That the parameter only we need. After getting JWT token we will retrieve the user ID from payload, and by the help of this method we will count the total courses enrolled by that specific user. So inside this API, if I add a single line comment, that is total course enrollment API, and it is using get request type. Now next, one more method we need something delete course from user. So inside this method we need to pass JWT token, as well as we need to pass our course ID into URL. Back to editor, let's say public function delete course, and inside this method we need course ID. If we add a single line comment, that is delete course API, and this is using get request type. So here we have three different methods inside this course controller, that is for the course enrollment, total courses user wise, and delete courses user wise. Now in the next video guys, we will create API routes, and one more thing, in that video we will authenticate all about these APIs, because user register and user API don't need actually any type of authentication. But if we are talking about user profile, user logout, user course enrollment, total user, delete course, then all these APIs we need to authenticate first via JWT token. So we will use API middleware. So for this video session guys, thank you for watching and have a great day.